Aloha and welcome attendees to the Hawaii Book and Music Festival. My name is Roger Jelinek. I'm Executive Director of the festival. And today we have a really interesting panel to present to you. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Chad Blair, who's the moderator of this distinguished group. Aloha, Chad.
Aloha, Roger, and thank you as always. Chad Blair with Civil Beat, Honolulu Civil Beat, politics and opinion editor. Totally out of my wheelhouse today, which is a delight to be talking about some new developments in the data front and the really helping our community here on Oahu in particular. And it's a real wonderful thing to have. I will say, by the way, that folks that are joining us, attendees, we always like to know who's on. So if you wouldn't mind with the chat, just put your name in there and where you're from. And of course, you're welcome to put questions in there as well. We'll be getting to questions later during this hour. There's someone tuning in right now. Our topic for the next hour is the new data culture for Hawaii. And here's a great example of really sharing data to help people rather than just keeping that data, using it to reach out. This is about the Ko'olau Housing Hui. It's a novel approach using multiple sources of data for addressing housing security on the Windward Coast during the pandemic, which of course is continuing today, and all the attendant problems. We may be coming out of COVID, but we're looking at tough economic times ahead. And when I say the Ko'olau Housing Hui on the Windward Coast, I mean from Kahuku to Waimanalo. I'm in Kaimuki, by the way. Let me introduce our three guests. Nick Redding, Executive Director of the Hawaii Data Collaborative. He's going to be talking about the new data culture and the concept of sharing that data instead of hoarding it. Terry George is President and CEO of the Harold Cale Castle Foundation, and he'll be talking about the specifics of this project. And then Atalina Pasi, community health worker, population health specialist at Papaola Lokahi, and she's a community health worker at Hui o Haula, which is on the north to windward side of Oahu. It's great to have all three of you here. I think we'll start with Nick, who has a PowerPoint, as does Terry. So Nick, without further ado, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Chad. And give me 1 minute to get everything up here. Okay, that should be right. Please let me know if it's not. Thanks again, Chad, and thank you, Roger and team at Hawaii Book and Music Festival for hosting this panel, inviting us to talk about this work that we're just very passionate about, the potential of data. As Chad said, I'm Nick Redding. I'm the Executive Director of the Hawaii Data Collaborative, and I'm going to offer a little bit of a zoom out before handing it off to fellow panelists to kind of go a little bit deeper on the Ko'olau engagement, just talk a little bit about how we're thinking about data and data culture, data sharing, and the potential of all that in Hawaii. So for those of you who don't know much about us, we at the Hawaii Data Collaborative operate off of a vision for Hawaii where quality, timely data guides how we respond to our pressing challenges. And so, while our early work focused on data and data products, we've over the last few years especially have come to understand the need more to build the capacities to develop a shared understandings of data for guiding decisions towards better outcomes. And while data and data technologies are crucial for that, and we're going to talk a little bit about those today, it's the ways in which we're able to come together and use data to move Hawaii forward that really matter. So given that, what holds us back from doing that? What holds us back from connecting around common data insights that guide how we move forward together to address those challenges, the challenges that we're faced with, the economic challenges in particular. Over the last couple of years, we've sought to understand this better, specifically around household and community need. How will households and communities need to be helped during these difficult economic times? And so we spent a lot of time speaking with leaders in service provision, philanthropy, and government. And we've heard fairly consistently that there isn't the data needed locally to understand what's happening in our households and communities, why it's happening, and what outcomes we're getting for the work we are doing. Often our data inquiries necessarily fall back on federal and national data sources, and we're used to these census and other kinds of data products, which are quite good and important, but they're limited in our ability to adapt to our local decision need. And especially now, they're not timely enough. There's lags of 1-2 years or more that prevent us from responding to the urgencies of the day effectively. So, given that, that's the where we are, but we really want to talk about how we move forward. And I want to open up the panel with this, because I think the Ko'olau project in particular really demonstrates this. It's, for us, given what we've heard from the community, we think moving forward starts with responding to the request for assistance to build those data capacities, funding those data capacities, providing that direct assistance, which is what we're focusing on, and looking for opportunities to provide a scaled solutions when that's appropriate. We also need to be prepared to respond to opportunities to connect organizations for data sharing, generating broader insights. And that starts by helping groups identify a common purpose around data, around shared data, and then working to build the systems and governance structures and things like that, some of the more technical work that would sustain those connections going forward. And ultimately, the reason we care about that and want to do that, besides directly helping the work on the ground and in communities, is that this is how we can start to connect data insights that come from the work that we do to program and policy deliberation, responding to inquiries from policymakers, and also being able to elevate new perspectives and offer new insights into what would help, and mobilizing resources accordingly. Working at all these levels to build data capacities is how we, at least at the Hawaii Data Collaborative, believe we can move forward. So the opportunity in Ko'olau for us is at the time that we did offer some support to this effort, and continuing, and the effort's ongoing, and continuing to reflect on what that means for those communities and for Hawaii, and for what we hope to be how we take on pressing challenges in the state with data going forward. We really see it as a model for addressing community need in a data-enabled way, and starting with that prioritization of creating a platform for community orgs that actually work in those communities to be supported with data, and that platform that enables then that effective cross-sector collaboration. And what Castle brought to that, being the container for that work and also prioritizing the data there, really helped the effort. I think continues to help the effort prioritize how data informs responding adaptively, how we move from baseline understanding of the communities to get started to data systems, both technical and hard systems, and the way that data is communicated to understand the issues, that supports and reinforces and moves the work forward. So with that, I'm really excited to hear from my fellow panelists, and then talk about what we've learned.
Well, thank you very much, Nick. Just real quickly before we go on to Terry, in layman's terms, what is data culture?
In layman's terms of data culture, I think when you think about what culture is, and the way we talk, say, about an organization culture or something like that, like what's normal, right? So a data culture where data is expected in terms of being evoked, in terms of how we understand what's going on and why, and how we hold ourselves accountable to the results that we're getting. I see a robust data culture making that normal, that data is part and parcel to how we deliberate around responding to pressing challenges, and we expect to have the data resources we need to do so.
Two more questions. The Ko'olau Housing Hui, that's our focus today, of course, but what's the status of data culture in general here in Hawaii? Is it behind the times? Is it cutting edge? Is it ahead of the curve? Is there room for improvement?
I guess I would fall in the room for improvement category. I don't want to say we're falling behind, because I think we have this heightened awareness of the importance of it, and that's a really important first step. And so now it's about starting to get strategic about how we do something about that. And so the conversations we have, there's with maybe an exception or two, there was no leader that said, hey, I've got plenty of data, I'm good to go. And there's no leader that said, I don't want to improve data capacities, for my organization and the others that I rely upon. And no leader that really said they didn't want help with that. So there's a lot of great opportunity there, a lot of great technologies, and a lot of great local capacity to help those leaders get that data capacity.
Right. And then my last question for you, as a journalist here at Civil Beat, which is where I am in our offices, we rely so heavily on data. And I took well your point about too often we rely on federal data, national data, census and so forth, but there's a lag time there. There's an overdependence. Is word catching on for not just journalists, but folks that need data, that there are in fact reliable sources here, like your organization, and that they know how to reach you? Is it starting to the word getting out?
Well, I don't know if the word's getting out that there's good data sources to tap into, because I think we still have some ways to go. It's hard for the data holders that exist locally to be able to respond to asks for data sharing and things like that, like data insight, and that's why we want to support them to be able to do so. But on the other end of it, certainly, even now when we're still working off of now 2020 census data, that wasn't a good year to collect data about Hawaii's population, how they're faring. We'll get 2021 data in December, the American Community Survey data in a that'll do a little bit better, but that just really, it's going to stick with us for a while. That the data we need to understand, ALICE, things like that, is still challenged. So
ALICE, the acronym again for that.
Sorry, sure. This is a United Way framework for understanding families that are financially on the margin. And ALICE is an acronym that stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. So that's before the pandemic. There was a lot of discussion around that, because it really tapped into the perception that was a challenge for many families in Hawaii that isn't typically measured, because it's at that level above poverty, which is measured in many different ways. And so the curiosity is now of okay, how have those families fared? What is that situation like? What's the magnitude of families who are in that situation, and what do they need help with?
These are folks with limited incomes. There's only so much ability to earn an income, and these families, things have only gotten worse. There's recent reports, the ALICE, I hate to assign a label for a subgroup, but really it's a large section of the people that live here. And I think when you said that the census data in 2020 was not the best because of COVID, right?
Well, sure. And, the census was challenged to do good data collection, and some of their releases were there were warnings attached to it about making use of that data. But also, our society wasn't all that stable right then, right? So that's part of what these things rely on to be useful, is that they're tapping into things that year to year don't change that much, and so we can kind of rely upon them to understand our communities. But I don't think any of us would say that slice in time of 2020 is a good metric to rely upon right now.
No, it wasn't even all that long ago.
Nope.
That was a terrific opening explaining the Hawaii Data Collaborative. And Terry, George, we're going to shift to you with the Castle Foundation, and this really connects us directly to the Ko'olau project, the Housing Hui, and I think you have a PowerPoint as well.
I do, Chad. Thank you, and Roger, thanks. Aloha, everyone. I'll just start with a story, though. Just want to situate people back in the spring, summer, and fall of 2020, and that'll help explain what was the problem we were trying to solve, and what's the particular strategy and how we used data. So spring 2020, the bottom fell out of the economy. 23% of us were unemployed almost overnight. Even though I run a grant-making foundation that's headquartered in the Windward Side and has been doing place-based grant-making for 60-something years from Kahuku to Waimanalo, I was shocked at the level of vulnerability of our communities to the closing of tourism's doors. Then go to the summer, and what you saw was spring and summer of 2020, the most innovative people to immediately start creating innovative solutions to things like food distribution, connecting producers, farmers, fishers, with localized community distribution agencies were community organizations, including a number that we had already funded. And then you fast forward to the fall, Chad, and federal money was beginning to flow through state and through the counties to address rent and utilities. And it was really slow to get moving. It finally got moving pretty well, but Nick's organization, the Hawaii Data Collaborative, was actually doing tracking of that. And one thing that we learned was that there was an inequitable nature of which communities got that early support and which did not. So there was an equity issue there. And basically the Data Collaborative showed maps which overlaid what a community should be receiving in terms of rent and utility assistance based on its share of the population and then what it was actually receiving. So we had bad news for our friends and neighbors. We had good news from the fact that community knows best, as Atalina will tell you all about, because she's one of the people who just personifies what community can do. Without asking permission, they just do it. And then third, we had some data that showed us that there was a real need. So with that, maybe I'll share screen real quick and just tell you a little bit about the model that we all built together. It's called the Ko'olau Housing Hui. And I'll tell you a little bit of the story of the various ways that we use data. Again, this is to serve our friends and neighbors who are at risk of eviction or who had already been evicted and needed to take advantage of these new one-time federal funds that were flowing through the city and counties. Pretty amazing Office of Economic Revitalization, I will say, through two great big nonprofits that are wonderful: CNHA, Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, and Catholic Charities. So together, after I really got scared in the fall, we got permission to start what we called this grassroots network of organizations that sort of partnered everybody together. We essentially got all of the organizations on this slide to work together to design a grassroots element to the model. So you had the federal money flowing through the city and county for rent and utility support and rapid rehousing. What was missing was trusted grassroots community navigators like Atalina to be that trusted helper to help people get through what is a document-heavy online process to prove that you're in trouble, to demonstrate that your income is been harmed by the pandemic. So we helped to select these community action teams spreading from Kahuku to Waimanalo, who then directly reached out to Windward Oahu residents. And they reached out 1,785 as of 2 days ago to apply for all of these sources of support that will keep them housed. And that's what the model looks like graphically. What it looks like in practice, Atalina will tell you more about. But basically, this is, you know, in Waimanalo at Hui Mahiai Aina, one of our partners. They walked the streets of Waimanalo, invited people to come over on a Saturday. The two women on the right in dark green shirts are Catholic Charities workers in their program. And then the two women in lighter tops on the right are community outreach workers from Hui Mahiai Aina. The women on the left side of the picnic tables are the kupuna and others that are bringing all their documents that they're at risk of getting evicted and they need guidance to upload their documents into the online application system, which by the way, you all know, just got reopened temporarily by the city and county just on Monday. They're only going to allow 8,000 new applications to go forward. And as of 2 days ago, no, as of yesterday, they were already at 4,000. So what we've done with our model essentially is to fund this overall network, both the large nonprofits, the middle ones, and the grassroots ones. There are 14 community navigators like Atalina. They work in close connection with both CNHA and Catholic Charities. They refer people for legal assistance to the Legal Aid Society of Hawaii, for mediation between landlord and tenant, and they do all kinds of other things, as Atalina is going to share. There's been a mad scramble to do this, but we basically used data throughout this. And so Nick's organization has scraped data to indicate to us which neighborhoods are of greatest likely vulnerability to eviction. And then we used Salesforce data that our community navigators use to track who they're serving and whether they're getting served well. And they overlaid the Salesforce dots of people that our Hui has served over those neighborhoods. And the good news is we found that we are addressing the equity issue. We're serving those neighborhoods that are of greatest need. We need to serve them more, and we are working at that. So the next line of data really has been the team of UH social workers that has been actually interviewing some of the families that our Hui has served to find out what the process was like for them. And then the third element of data is really our very own Salesforce network. So Atalina and her 13 or 14 counterparts are now Salesforce whizzes with the help of Purple Maya, which is a wonderful Native Hawaiian-led tech training nonprofit, primarily for youth. But in this particular case, they've tailored the Salesforce data to our needs. So we've used all that, as Nick has said, to get real-time data about what's working, what's not. You know, if Atalina's side of the Hui is going gangbusters as it has, then we steer other community navigators to their organization and their Hui there in Hauula, Kahuku, and Laie to say, what is it you're doing about outreach or whatever that's causing you to be able to serve so many people? Salesforce data, by the way, Salesforce is a relatively simple database that maybe Nick, you can explain better. It was actually used by retail companies to track sales. That's why it's called Salesforce. But it ended up being eminently adaptable to our need so that we could know whether or not we're serving the people who most need to be served in this. So it's a really simple database that's served us well, because for privacy reasons, we can't tap into the city and county's database or Catholic Charities or CNHA's database. So we created our own. And now what's neat about that, Atalina, is we've got 1,765 or 63 families who we can now reach out to and have developed trusted relationships to find out, for example, are they employed? What is their skill level? Do they have an interest in maybe a workforce development initiative? And so it's going to be really a gold mine for us going forward as we use it respectfully. A
couple questions. Salesforce. When I hear the organization, that's one word, right? Salesforce.
It is
sort of a tech giant cloud, putting data in the cloud. Help me out here, Nick.
Go ahead. I'm happy to. Like Terry described, it's essentially an online database platform that's very customizable, and we are in no way affiliated with Salesforce or anything like that, but we often do offer it as an opportunity for efforts like this and smaller nonprofits and things, because they do have what they call a Power of Us program that makes the platform available free to nonprofits up to 10 user licenses to use the full capabilities of the platform. So for organizations or community groups, things like that want to collect and organize information, and even sensitive information, it's robust enough to protect that data. It's a good platform for that, with lots of tools to be flexible around how access is granted to the data, how it's recorded, analyzed, reported, things like that. So it's really not so much about the brand or anything. It's just the capability it allows those who would need the data system.
I'm just curious. I wonder if you know, headquartered in the Bay Area, I'm guessing?
I think so. I'm not quite sure though.
But, you know, of course, being in the cloud, they're everywhere, right? So
exactly.
I do have a couple questions for Terry, but I did want to check. Purple Maya, forgive my ignorance, Maya means?
Maya, banana, right, Atalina? So this is a group that started actually at, I think, Jarrett Middle School in Palolo Valley, teaching culturally appropriate tech skills and creating tech games to kids there. And they've now spread throughout many schools They have a tech challenge. So the idea is how to embrace technology, but embrace our indigenous culture at the same time. And it's created such an opportunity for youth to be engaged. It's a great organization as well.
Jared's just right up the street from where we are. We're in Kaimuki. Palolo Valley is right out the window. Purple. Why purple, Maya?
You'll have to ask the founders. I'm sure there's kauna around that, Chad. Why the purple Maya? It's probably got some special qualities to it.
That's great. I have just a couple more questions before we move on to Atalina. And I believe that is the ko'olau in your background there, although I know that's not a live shot probably, but that looks like the unmistakable ko'olau. I was curious, and maybe this ties into Nick as well. Terry, you were talking about the inequality issue, and they're trying to get federal support to all these communities in Hawaii, helping with rent, utilities, to prevent people from eviction. I'm not sure, but I think we actually reported on some of this. Can you identify where some of the hardest hit areas in the state were regarding this struggle?
You know, off the top of my head, I can't name all the areas. What happened was each county developed its own approach and response. And then there was demonstrated need in every neighborhood. So, however, the densest areas of need tended to be areas that are furthest from opportunity. So certainly the west side of Oahu, there was a significant need. I would say new immigrant populations that were just getting established. There was also a significant need and a heck of a lot of inequity as we learned in terms of the way the healthcare system and the public health system responded to COVID. And then you would be surprised, Chad, but not as a percentage of the whole, but as absolute numbers, the zip codes covering Kaneohe and Kailua contain huge, huge numbers of families that are at the Alice level and below, who had a desperate need and were paying way too much of their income for very expensive and not very good housing. So yes, there are pockets of need, and Nick's team has been able to isolate down to the census tract those that have greatest need. But the sad news, Chad, is the way that our economy is set up right now, it's everywhere. And again, therefore, why centralize the decisions of who needs to be helped first? It's better to decentralize it using community leaders who are able to do outreach in the only way that anybody can, because they know exactly who to reach, as Atalina will share with you.
And then, of course, the focus here is Oahu. I think I did mention statewide, but it's really an Oahu focus concerning your work.
For this, at least it is, yeah. And by the way, it's been an enormous success. That's all credit to everybody.
Sounds like a model for other parts of the state. Two other things, you showed that slide where you had all these various groups that you partnered with, CNHA and so forth. Was there any hesitation on them, some that maybe didn't want to join in because they're like, what, you're going to use data to do? I'm hungry here. I'm going to lose my apartment. And what do you mean here? I wonder if there was some resistance. We're from the government and we're here to help you, you know?
Well, I mean, we kind of played tough guy a little bit. Yeah, Atalina. So we kind of said, whichever community group wants to step forward, you got to know that we have to figure out whether we're helping enough people and whether we're helping those who have the greatest needs. So take it or leave it. If you're going to do this with us, we're going to give you Salesforce licenses. We're going to get you partners so we can adapt to that. But we are going to use data. But we're going to trust you on how to outreach to people and how to help serve their needs so that they remain housed. So we were we insisted on the use of data to track results.
A little strong arming there. That's okay. Of course, it was a crisis. It still continues to be. And the last thing that kind of struck me, you mentioned how this process for folks that apply, and you showed the slide there in Waimanalo and the picnic table and so forth. You mentioned that it's document heavy, and that what you're doing, this phrase stuck with me, to prove that you're in trouble. That really is a strong thing. Gathering those documents can be very frustrating, and keeping track of them. And then I'm guessing that is this then entered electronically, digitally? Is that how it works?
Yeah, that's probably a question best answered by you, Atalina, since you're in the midst of that, you and your colleagues.
You see how I'm segueing?
But yeah,
Really-
but the one thing I'll tell you is that these were rules that were set up by the U.S. Treasury Department after the laws were passed to allow some pandemic monies to flow. So we're not just doing it because we love to have people prove that they're low income or harmed by the pandemic, but because those were the rules of the game.
Yeah, absolutely, to follow the federal rules, and then not just for people struggling to pay rent and utilities, but businesses, the paycheck protection program and so forth. Well, Atalina, we will go to you as someone who is right there on the ground in this regard. Please share with us your thoughts about this Hui.
So I just want to give some background. There are 5 different CAT teams. So CAT stands for Castle Action Teams, or Hui, geographically located to be easily accessible to communities. In Waimanalo, we have Hui Mahi'ai Aina and Waimanalo Health Center. Kailua, we have Castle Adventist Medical Center. Kaneohe, Kahalu'u, Waikane, Waihole, we have Key Project. And in the Ko'olauloa, from Ka'ava to Kahuku, we have Hui Oha'ula. These CAT teams have a history of serving their communities, and from their experience, they knew what the barriers and needs of their communities would be when first introduced to the Windward Oahu Eviction Prevention Program back in the beginning of 2021. Along with these teams that played pivotal roles in bridging the gaps and filling the needs of the city's rent and utility assistance program, the Harold K.L. Castle Foundation, Terrence, Jill, and Patria worked behind the scenes, gathering organizations like Terry explained in his PowerPoints, such as Legal Aid, the Mediation Center of the Pacific, Hawaiian Community Assets, Partners in Care, Catholic Charities Hawaii, Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, Hawaiian Community Lending, and so many more organizations to hui together and find solutions. Being part of such a beautiful movement and seeing so many organizations willing to collaborate, and especially Catholic Charities and Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, who are the organizations with the contracts to process rent and utility relief applications and disperse funds by the city. These organizations heard our pleas as the community navigators. We would tell them, you know what, Auntie no more her social security card. She lost them and the office closed because of COVID, but she needs to pay her rent because the landlord said she stayed behind 2 months already. So what Catholic Charities Hawaii did is they accommodated our communities in ways that were pono and filled with aloha. They created self-certification of missing document forms, and through the relationship that Castle Foundation created, we're able to work side by side. Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, same thing. Shout out to Leimomi, who would get late night emails and phone calls with stories like, sis, you know, all the families at BYU Hawaii, can we send in a letter to financial services letting them know the students we are working with by name and that their application for rental assistance is processing with you folks? Because tomorrow is the last day to pay for their tuition or all their classes will be dropped. Leimomi was on top of every request, always calm and positive. Each client was a mother, grandpa, auntie, student, father, just so many community members with a story that began with, because of COVID, I lost my job. Because of COVID, my business shut down. Because of COVID, I couldn't find a job. Because of COVID, I couldn't work because the kids had distance learning and nobody to watch and help them. But because of COVID, I am grateful for the miraculous efforts of Castle Foundation and holding our ko'olau communities by the hand and walking us through all the challenges. They would always ask us questions. How is everything going? What are you seeing in the communities? How can we help? So just a big warm mahalo to Castle Foundation and Terry for helping us and being our lifeline during this pandemic, because it's been a big struggle, but we were able to help so many families. So mahalo.
Just mahalo to you, Atalina. We didn't do anything except provide the resources to glue everybody together, but the way you and your Dinah Khan, Denise, and everybody has stepped up among the navigators, I've just learned so much. You wouldn't believe the persistence, Chad. Just one thing to Atalina, I remember first meeting you and you talked about a woman who, had reached out to you, you had provided her help, and you kept calling, and she didn't answer the phone. So what did you do? Did you wait? No, you drove over to her house, knocked on the door, yelled and said, hey, this is Atalina. And she opens the door and you said, how come she didn't call you? Or how come you didn't call me? And I think she had to give up her phone or something like that. But that's the example of the persistence of this amazing team of Wahine. And yeah, they're all Wahine. Every single one of them, Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander, except one or two, I think. So I'm not surprised, because that's kind of the absolute, core of our community. Yeah.
Atalina, a couple questions for you. To Terry's point, how often did you have to do that? Hop in your car because maybe they were having a problem with the phone, or maybe they were scared. Maybe they were unsure about this whole process and needed someone a human face, if you will, to talk them through that. Not just you, but your colleagues as well. How often did you have to get on the road and go visit people, a very rural part of the islands?
So we're blessed here. We have this communication system called the Coconut Wireless. So everybody knows everybody, or your auntie lives next to this family who knows this family, and we call and we find phone numbers. Last resort, we're gonna come to your house, make sure you don't have a dog. But yes, everybody knows everyone within the community, and we're all connected. We either go to school, we work together, we go to church together. So because of the great network and the tight-knit community that we already have, it was easy to do outreach.
Except for the dogs. There's dogs all over this island. You were talking about the woman who couldn't find her social security card, is that right? And how you were able to partner with other groups. I don't know where my social security card is. If I had to find it, even I have my own document heavy problem there. How often did that cause a delay that really impacted people? I mean, was it a day to turn that kind of thing around, a week? Or how easy was it to do those kinds of things, to find those missing documents that are essential to qualify for the federal rules?
So in the very beginning, it took a while, and some gave up because waiting for their appointment with DMV to go and renew their driver's license, but all the offices were closed. So we had to advocate for our community and let them know, this is what we're experiencing on the ground. All of the offices are closed. You have to set up an appointment. Setting up an appointment, they're not going to get their social security cards till a month or even 2 months, depending on mail. And they were just so happy to help us. And I know it's because of the relationship that Castle Foundation established with each of these organizations. And every time we would run into like a roadblock and I don't think they think that Hui Ha'ula is a real organization. Could you guys please talk to them? We would always turn to Castle Foundation to give credit to our organization and let them know that we're working with the city, that we're trying to help our community and bridge those gaps and those barriers.
I did want to just ask, if you don't mind, tell me a little bit about Hui Ha'ula, as well as Papa'ola Lokahi, which is I know of the second group. It's been around for a long time, but just for those folks who don't know, could you just give us sort of a description of the two organizations that you are working with?
So Papa'ola Lokahi is a Native Hawaiian health board for the entire United States. And they have 5 Native Hawaiian healthcare systems within the state of Hawaii that help to improve the quality of life of Native Hawaiian communities because of all of the chronic diseases, and to provide more cultural healing for Native Hawaiian communities and beyond. Hui Ha'ula is a small nonprofit in Ha'ula that is currently working on a Resilience Hub, the first that the state will ever see, hopefully. They're still trying to get funds for that. Hui Ha'ula is run by Dottie Kelly Paddock and her board, Strong Kupuna, and we look up to them. They're amazing. They're frontline, always at city and state meetings, advocating for Ko'olauloa. Currently, they have a Kupuna program. They have programs for the keiki, to learn about the Aina, and just, they're both amazing nonprofits.
Papa'olelo Kahi, it's not just these shores, it's serving Native Hawaiians across the country. There's so many, particularly in California, Las Vegas. I'm not sure if I have the numbers right, but well over 100,000 plus, I think, or something like that, those numbers. But not just here in the islands. What's a resiliency hub, Atalina?
A resiliency hub is an emergency shelter, and it's an emergency shelter that can withstand high winds, a tsunami, natural disasters of any kind. And currently in the state of Hawaii, in the Ko'olauloa area, we have no emergency shelter for 20 miles of coastline communities. The last hurricane warning was Hurricane Douglas, and the city and county sent out a map and they pinned all of the emergency shelters. So the top northern part of Oahu had no emergency shelter for our communities.
And there's just one 2-lane road in and out, correct?
Correct. And the road is falling apart. Erosion is getting to our roads, and when we have high surf, the waters come.
Particularly Ava area and so forth, right? It's starting to eat away. It's really quite frightening. For those who don't think climate change is real, it is in fact real. You know, I wondered if the three of you might just talk about some of the hurdles you had to overcome. What were some of the challenges you had to work through transferring the data into helping people directly? And I think I'll go to Nick and Terry and Atalina, but you can chime in whenever you wish. Nick, any challenges you had to work through to make this work?
I think the biggest challenge is what Terry described in us helping them to identify community need and to, because what we had to do, back to that comment about census data, that's how we usually understand where community need lies, and the data we had to start 2020 reflected a relatively stable situation. That same data is what we had when we were April of 2020. And so, the challenge we overcome was quickly, we worked with some very sophisticated modelers that were able to, it was something we'd been working on anyway, but we were able to accelerate being able to model, and I don't want to get into the technical part of it, but basically a way to model forward census data to reflect current circumstance. So pulling in unemployment trends, population data, things like that, being able to plug in more current data sources to be able to carry forward that census data to create a better estimate of what's likely happening with households and communities currently. And so that was the hurdle we overcame to then be able to be supportive to groups like Terry that wanted to know where should we be focusing and on what across these communities.
Terry, challenges for the Castle Foundation.
Salesforce was foreign to me. A baby boomer is not too tech savvy, although some baby boomers are. And it was foreign to a lot of our community navigators. So until we brought Purple Maya on board to really adapt it to need and be available on a weekly basis to check in with each of the community action teams, it wasn't being used as much. So we didn't really have a sense of how many were being served. Because remember, this is a culture shift from talking story with people, putting down something on your notepad of, going to follow up with somebody, to uploading it all in some consistent format. So that took some real adjusting, I would say, both by us and at the Harold Castle Foundation and by the community action teams. And the last part, Chad, is that we actually had the Hui set up and ready to go before the city and county had the full green light of how the program was going to be set up. But then it was like strap on and you're on a rocket that's just racing. And then we also were given relatively short notice because the city and county also realized, oh my gosh, the money's going to run out. And so they had to pretty quickly shut down the portal. And we had some problems sometimes technically when the portal was jammed. So just at the way this Hui works is really powerful, Chad. So we're at Key Project. There were families there. There was a mom who was whose baby, one of the community navigators just took over to kind of get the baby to go to sleep. The other one was freeing up the mom so that she could apply online on laptops we had. And then there was a third person, our coordinator, who was on the phone with the city and county saying, hey, this portal's not working right now. So we were providing real-time information so they could fix the technical problem and let more people in. So we overcome a lot of barriers just through that kind of persistence that Atalina has shared today.
Now, I don't know if I did ask you, we may take it for granted because it's been around so long, but just briefly, what is the Harold K.L. Castle Foundation, Terry?
So Chad, we're a private nonprofit foundation that was started in 1962 by the owner of Kaneohe Ranch, Harold Castle, and he gifted it with gifts of land that produced income, mostly residential land in Kailua, but some commercial land there in Kaneohe. So that's our endowment, is all from this one guy. And then we use that endowment to make grants. So we are a small staff. We do work statewide to restore our nearshore oceans health and to help close the achievement and post-secondary attainment gaps throughout the state. And then we do intensive place-based grant making where Harold Castle made his money in Ko'olauloa and Ko'olaupoko.
Now, Atalina, you actually did talk about a couple of challenges. I'm guessing you have one or two more you might be able to share, particularly trying to work with each other as well as the outreach that you've done. What else was a challenge for you folks to overcome?
I would say, since we're talking about the new data culture of Hawaii, there's a scripture that says, if you bring but one soul unto me, how great shall be your joy in the kingdom of my Father. And that has been my motto throughout this whole program. I know we're focusing on how data and numbers are the ways in which we can better inform decision making. However, just as important as quantitative data is qualitative data, narratives, stories, and the Indigenous lens. The Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander experiences need to be heard and taken into account to view, focus, and refocus our efforts. Each family has a unique story plagued with social determinants of health, systemic racism, institutional discrimination. We need to identify the policies that are creating barriers for our marginalized communities to receive equitable services, to achieve our grand goal of improving quality of life and achieving health equity within Ko'olau communities and the entire state.
Share with me that scripture again. That's from the Bible, is it not?
I didn't have time to look up the reference, so I will give it to you after.
No, that's fine. Would you just repeat it again?
I just remembered it.
Yeah, just share it with us again. It was beautiful.
If you bring but one soul unto me, how great shall be your joy in the kingdom of my Father.
I have a couple more questions for all of you, if that's okay. What if you don't have a computer? What if you don't have access to Wi-Fi? How much of that, and we're talking about data here, we're talking about networks. Yeah, the coconut wireless is important and central to this whole thing, but that is also a struggle in rural parts of the state, particularly rural parts of Oahu, your neighborhood in Hauula. I mean, how much did that come up? Because I know there were people that couldn't even pay their spectrum bills, their cable bills and whatnot. So if you could, all three of you, talk a little bit about, the irony that you need to have a computer, but you're also dealing with people that may not even have one or access to the internet.
So there's been a lot of families. So when distance learning was on, every family was able to get a hotspot from their elementary school. And in Ko'olauloa, all of the public schools here are Title I schools, meaning 50% or more of the children that go to these schools are on free or reduced lunch. They would use their kids' hotspots. If their kids didn't have any hotspots, they would come to the office and we would help them, or we would be on the phone and we would ask them the questions and they would give us the answers and we would input it into the computer. Our copy machine was available to the community. They could come in and we would send applications off to get birth certificates, whatever documents they needed to be document ready to apply for not only the rent and utility assistance programs, but for food stamps, for MedQuest, for anything and everything that would help to help them through this whole pandemic, experience that we were all going through. And it was, as everybody came in, the best outreach effort was when someone that we helped went out and told their family and their friends. And because they came in and they saw us and we helped them and we walked them through the whole application, they knew exactly what to do. So they'd be here with us and with their family member telling them, no, you have to have a document that says this, or your COVID hardship has to include either being laid off, loss of hours, or your business closure. They knew everything. And they were our best outreach workers, because they would go and they would help everyone on their street because they knew how it felt and they knew how much of a change it brought to their family and how much of a blessing it was. So
before I ask Terry and Nick about hardware and online access and so forth, Atalina, you mentioned the schools. I'm guessing that the schools were all out, right? Because it's distance learning. And so does that mean that those hotspots were essentially somewhat freed up to help with these medical applications? Not medical, but for the utilities and so forth. Do you understand where I'm going with this? I'm thinking about bandwidth. I'm thinking about, were you overloading the system, or was it because, in fact, schools, because I guess if you're doing distance learning, you need bandwidth too, don't you? So maybe that's what I'm thinking. I wonder if there was a capacity issue at all, since you're using the school system here.
There were also assistance programs where through Spectrum and through Hawaiian Telecom, they were able to get free internet for, I think, the whole year of 2020. Once we moved into 2021, there was a discounted price for internet.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that. And the question to Terry and Nick is about the challenges, people without a computer, Wi-Fi, anything that can go wrong in this digital world that we all live in. Terry or Nick?
So I'll start. Where our grants to the community action teams included money as they needed it for things like laptops and hotspots. Secondly, there are apps on the phone that people use to scan and upload documents right then and there into this rent and utilities portal. So, and finally, not all the navigators needed to do the uploading. Sometimes there was a little bit of specialization among the teams, right? Atalina, I think you guys had Didi for a while to do a lot of the actually inputting into Salesforce. So the roles varied. Some mostly did outreach, others did direct case management with families, and still others did some of the data upload.
Nick?
Yeah, for us, I would offer kind of a general perspective from the support that we provide, that, it's really important to follow from the data aspiration that would lead an organization or a group to adopt a technology for data, to then take the time to work with those who would actually be working with these tools on the ground in communities to kind of process map out, like, how do you do this work currently? How do you capture data? And so that you can start to troubleshoot up front, like, how will this serve you, rather than requiring an adaptation the other way around, right? And so being able to spend the extra time to understand the operational considerations of, alongside the data need, and then troubleshooting with leadership, like, here's going to be some challenges. Let's talk a little bit about the technologies that are appropriate to that, so you don't end up having something that's either burdensome or a poor fit to the places and areas in which people are working. So just kind of a general level is that there are solutions. You want to start from an understanding of how the work is carried out and what's possible, and make a good fit to that.
Are there any other communities that you know of in the state of Hawaii that are using a similar model as the Ko'olau Housing Hui? It seems to me it's a model for so many others, and the Alice population is throughout the entire state, and it's in high double percentages. Are there others that are using any typical similar kind of program?
I think there's some elements of it, Chad. Waianae Comp has a team. I think some of the Pacific Waianae Comprehensive Health Center has some elements of this model. I think there's one also among some of the Pacific Islander community. And then on Hawaii Island, there's a network called Vibrant Hawaii that has arisen during COVID. That's also got a very community-based approach to addressing not only this short-term opportunity to get federal rent and utility help, but also sort of long-term issues.
Okay, and I guess this will probably be just about the final question. Things haven't necessarily gotten better in terms of rents. They're going up. Utility prices, particularly here on Oahu, because of the closure of the coal burning plant, those prices are going up, and that's going to continue. Oil prices globally are in serious fluctuation. And the last time I checked the price of gasoline, it's well over $5. And I know that's even more outside of urban Honolulu. Where do we go from here? And maybe we'll end with this before we bring Roger back for closing comments. I'll start with Nick and Terry and end with Atalina. What's next?
Well, where I would go with that is given what you've said, there's so much unpredictability, so much change, really important that we continue to take seriously our local data sources that are timely. So one data resource that we've been investing a lot of time and partnership in has been United Way's 2-in-1 system, being able to capture the data behind that when there are requests for assistance, we can also capture that in terms of a way to track changing needs when there's more increases in requests for food assistance or housing, rental relief, things like that. That can be a weekly updated kind of tracker of what's going on with that. So we're almost at the point where there's going to be a full data capture from that and dashboard that can benefit those who kind of want to see leading indicators of changing need.
Very encouraging. Terry?
Community knows best. Trust the community. Community knows what the solutions are. They're closest to the problem. All we need to do is resource the community in the right way. And we're talking about our friends and neighbors. These are not people without skills. These are people who are our friends and neighbors who were stuck in a situation that we need to kind of work together with. And then finally, I put in the chat, there's a couple of days left before this rent and utilities portal closes again. So if anybody knows someone in need who hasn't yet applied, I put some information in the chat to reach out.
Thank you, Terry. Atalina, the final word to you.
I just want to echo what Terry said. The community has all the answers. Looking at the data and having conversations and surveys within our community, we found that they wanted a financial literacy program. So we partnered with Windward Community College, and they complained how far Windward Community College was. So we brought it to our Hau'ula Community Center, and they had their last day of class today. And they shared their vision boards and everything that they've learned in this class, and they want to do more. So we're going to have a career and development course coming up next semester, and educating, empowering the community with the resources that they need is the best way to go. And partnering with grassroots groups and organizations to provide important data and information is where our new data culture needs to partner and build their foundation.
Thank you all three for your good work, for these really stories that make us feel better in this very dark time that we're in, and to also make me understand that data culture is not something to be afraid of. And on that note, I'm going to say, Roger, take us out.
Well, thank you very much. That was extraordinarily informative and moving. And I got a lot of ideas for next year, particularly on, I've been trying to figure out how to present inequity in a really substantive and concrete way, so it's not just a slogan. And there are plenty of ideas here. I was also fascinated by the power of decentralizing this kind of energy, because too often we look to government to solve the problem. We're not using the local energy, the people who actually are best to use it. So thank you very much. It was an excellent panel, and thank you, Chad, for really terrific moderating. I have just one final plea, which is we hope to be in person next year. We'll be at UH Manoa. It takes a lot of funding to get there. And we're going to have a fundraiser in January the 26th. Please put it on your calendar. I will be reminding everyone endlessly this month. And hope to see you there. Thank you again very much. Aloha.